of post them all up after on YouTube. That way, if people want to go back and they miss something, they can kind of take notes again.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm good with that.
And the people that are on right now will just have to hear it again. But what time do you have yours going too, right?
Yeah, 2:00 Monday through Friday. So that was way more work than I anticipated. We had almost 400 registrations, and the amount of, you know how people are, like they just want one link sent to them, and we have like a Slack forum that kind of goes, that's kind of like a forum that we can communicate with them outside of Zoom.
Yeah.
And we're like really like happy to do that, and like we wanted to do that. But people were like just expecting like the Zoom link, and so I was like blown up with emails and direct messages, which was fine. I think I got to almost everybody. But there's also like challenges of, people were using school district emails, and they were coming back blocked. And that was like the only way I had to get a hold of them was their school district email. And it was like, they're blocking every email that comes, through this. So just trying to make sure like everybody has access to it. But yeah, ours is at 2:00. It usually goes till about 3:30. Some of our earlier ones went a little bit longer, but we're getting better at managing the time. And it's kind of cool. We've talked about a lot already, and we've got 2 more weeks left. So
I'll definitely we'll bring it back up again, or I'll defer off to you. So that way, I just wanted to make sure you were still doing it before we, so all these people just have to listen to it again.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's one of the best things about this time. And I kind of talked about it last night, was that we have the ability to kind of just take a couple steps back and do stuff like this, to help keep us sane, but also to help learn and help give out information, or for everybody to kind of give their ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. So just so you guys know, I know you guys talked about possibly sharing my screen. I have pulled up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different presentations. Not to share everything in all of them, but just in case something comes up that I do want to share my screen, these are all things I can maybe share. So if I say like, hold on, let me find it, I'm not, that's why I'm going to try to share the appropriate pages for whatever question comes up, whether it's from players or you guys.
Yeah, of course.
From there. And then if we ever do this again, literally I'm with all this downtime working on kind of a master presentation that's like probably 150 slides long. That's not ever designed to be presented all at one time, but that's just kind of like a home base for stuff like this, so I don't have to have that many up.
Yeah, of course.
From there. So how have your turnouts been so far? I know you guys have done some pretty cool stuff, so that's awesome. It's awesome you guys are engaging with your athletes too. I know it's like a tough time, and to do anything. What are you guys doing like business wise? How are you guys hanging in there? And I don't know if that's actually with everyone on, maybe we can talk about that later.
No, that's fine. I mean, one of the biggest things that we're trying to do is just stay in touch, because that's our number one priority. The chips will kind of fall where they may, I think, once we can kind of get up and running. But my first goal, once we can, is to get the one-on-one lessons back in, because I think those are going to be the first people that are allowed back in, to be able to keep the distance and not necessarily continue to spread if they have it. But the problem with the gym is that obviously just people in general, it's a lot easier to spread the germs in the gym. So maybe even starting to do the physical therapy side of things first, and then and the one-on-one lessons. The biggest concern that I mentioned yesterday was the throwing, was making sure that that guys and girls are still continuing to throw, because I could see that being a problem once everybody tries to rush back, or the first day everybody's outside and then everybody just tries to go from 0 to 100, and now you end up with a bunch of arm injuries.
We had Mike Reinhold, speaking of our Zoom calls, on today, and that was exactly kind of what we were talking about too, man, is what you can do now is basically so the 2 most common injuries, the thing that he talks about, like we brought him on to talk about arm injuries, and he was like, baseball players, the 2 most common injuries are obliques and hamstrings. Make sure you're outside sprinting. Make sure you guys are swinging the bat, even if you are just doing dry swings. He said you have to maintain your workload. When people get injured is when they work outside of their comfortable workload. And so whether that's overuse, but really overuse is like not being prepared. And there's a certain threshold that, I think we should talk about, just with athletes in general, and maybe not on this call, but certain threshold of what actually indicates overuse. But a lot of times overuse is under prepared, from that aspect. And so we throw it around like it's just this like, buzzword. But a lot of time overuse is just underprepared. And obviously, like, you can't have a 12-year-old kid going out throwing 150 pitches. How do you prepare for that? Unless you're like, you know what I mean? So like, there's like, that's where that threshold comes into play. Like if you can't physically prepare for it, like that's overuse. Otherwise it's underprepared, on that side of things. So whether it's swinging a bat, whether it's running up a hill, whether it's, doing like just maintaining it. And his philosophy for everybody, is basically treat this like you're in season. And like when you're in season, you're going to prepare, you're going to try to maintain. But like these guys who are trying to go like, balls to the walls and treat it like this off season. And there's a lot of coaches that are just kind of preaching like, maybe you guys have seen it. If you're not working right now, you're going to get left behind. Like it's not so much you're going to get left behind, it's that you're not going to be prepared to play and you might injure yourself. I mean, everyone's in the same boat. And so I don't think we need to add like extra stress to these kids and these players at any level. I mean, especially, even at the pro level, where these guys are getting paid to play, like everyone's in the same boat. Like there's some pro guys that like are like are waiting on contract years, or like they're 6-year free agents, or, things like that have to perform this year. And this is what's happening to them. There's guys who just got drafted last year that it's like, whatever, like they don't know what I can do yet. Like I'm safe. And so like fair doesn't always mean equal. And that's gonna be across the board anywhere. Like, if your parents, are in oil or in something ridiculous, and you live in a $7.5 million house and you've got a full basement, in your full basement cage and workout area and personal trainer that lives with you, like obviously I'm going like way extreme, all the way to like living in an apartment complex, not being able to do anything, with no yard, like just parking garages and, parking lots around you. I think finding a way to be creative, but like putting extra stress on different people in different environments, like that's not fair, as us for coaches. Like we have to like manage expectations and manage kind of the workload that we're asking them to do as well.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that was a great intro, but I'm going to have John.
I mean to hijack your call right there. I apologize.
No, that's fine. That's fine. We kind of got a few more people to sign in a little bit later. So I'm going to hand things back to John to kind of let him manage the interview and the whole process.
Yeah. So I think we got a good amount of people in, so I'm sure we'll get some stragglers along the way, but want to thank everyone for coming back out again tonight. Like I said, we're really excited about doing this and kind of keeping you guys all engaged. So tonight we're excited to welcome Ryan Johansen, assistant hitting coordinator for the Chicago White Sox and owner of Johansen Baseball, to the call. Ryan, thanks for coming on and being with us tonight.
Dude, I'm pumped, man. Like, let's go. We've kind of exchanged Instagram messages and over the years, and love what you guys do. So I'm excited.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. So, I figured, why don't you give a little bit of background on yourself, like talk a little bit about your playing days, kind of where you are now.
I was the worst baseball player in the history of all time. But no, that's it's not quite entirely true. I was kind of a two-way guy in college. In high school. And when I went to I was recruited as a two-way guy to go to college, and I had a coaching switch. So the coach that recruited me was fired. I walked up on day one of the fall and was like, "Hey, coach, where are the two-way guys go?" He basically had pitchers over there, and I was kind of expecting. I was like, I was a shortstop in high school, like probably, second base, like whatever. I hit a little bit, in high school, and he looked me up and down. I was just like skinny kid, like, expecting to like, just walk in and hit and and just go. And he's like, "Johansen, like go with the pitchers." So like I became like, quote unquote, like, pitcher only or whatever. And at that point I was like, okay, well, whatever. So I was like, at that point in my career, gave everything I had to that mark. I still felt like there was like more to be had. I ended up getting hurt. And like our local hometown, like, did the whole, how being like hometown guy, and all that stuff, did like wrote an article on like the injury and all that stuff. It was really embarrassing. It was terrible. Basically I came back home, and I was a manager at a Division I school in Northern Illinois. Basically I did like just all the grunt work. I didn't actually like do anything like productive, but I learned a lot, which was really cool. And then I started working at a company called All Star Sports Instruction. And what I did there was probably one of the most important things in my career, to not only grow as a person, but also like learn to communicate. I was basically working with anybody from 3 years old to 9 years old. And I had classes where I had sessions where I was basically monitoring parents and teaching them how to teach their kids at 3 years old. And like, it was called these parent talk classes. And it was like literally like parents and toddlers, and like how to like manage them and put them in order. And like, I put this on my resume for a reason. And I like describe it in my resume as like one of the most impactful things that I've ever done as a coach. If you can't figure out how to get a bunch of 3-year-olds to stand in a line by yourself, and then especially when the parents are like just talking in the corner, like your communication skills have to be on point, and you have to be able to relate to every personality. And so that was like one of the most impactful things. And I put it on my resume, and people were like, what are you doing? Like, why, this is like a park district job? Are you kidding me? And like, I'm very adamant about it. Like, I'll continue to do it. Like, you know, I've been criticized for it in the past, but I've also had people tell me like, wow, this is incredible. So it's something that's really important to me. Dealing with anybody from autistic kids who either A, were diagnosed, and B, like probably not diagnosed yet, who really had communication issues, to like, hey, why don't you come over here? Like instant tears, yelling, like, oh my gosh, you're asking me to do something outside my comfort level. And then having to console them with their parents, like not even caring. That was like very challenging. And so that's kind of where, anyways, from there, I graduated into, or moved on into a role where I was the instructional program director, and I basically had to write camps. And so everything I kind of learned and everything I want to do on the development side, I was starting to able to actually organize for myself with a company called Home Plate Batting and Pitching. They wanted to move more into rentals and teams, and just kind of like, you know, the overhead, which, you know, us as facility owners can kind of understand, like kind of maybe some of those pressures. But I really wanted to do something in player development. I really wanted to put systems together where people could come and they could really get what they needed that was very individualized to them. And I think a lot of that grew from knowing that, you know, all these kids are going to be different than the previous job I had before that. And also knowing that, like, I felt like I was just, you know, maybe a cog in a machine in a lot of the camps that I'd been to in the past, you know, as a previous player as well. So basically what I decided to do is start my own company from there. I started a company called Athlete Farm. Nobody knew what it was. I was terrible at marketing. Nobody knew who I was. Nobody knew that I was the one that ran it. Like, people would find out and be like, oh, you're the guy, you're the Athlete Farm guy. Like, really, dude, it's awesome. Like, we'll definitely go. But like, Athlete Farm online was like the worst idea ever. And it was, I live in a cornfield. So my idea was like, we had green, like lime green walls and like black end caps. And it was like where athletes are like bred, not born. We had like tires, and like, it was just this like kind of savage, like dungeony place that was all about like building these farm boys and these animals. It was kind of funny because my biggest market there was actually softball. Like, those were like the most elite athletes I had trained up to that point. I mean, we trained so many girls that went on to play Division I softball and like set records and do really cool stuff as pitchers and things like that. But then I noticed that I kind of became like the workout guy. Like, everybody thought I was just like we had a cage there, like we did all our baseball stuff, but like, then it was like, oh, you're the workout guy. It's like, no, it's like not what it's about. Like, it's a baseball, softball training facility. Like, it's called Athlete Farm. Like, we're building athletes, like we're growing them, like, you know, all this stuff. And I have this like big marketing plan. Really funny story about Athlete Farm. So I had this program I called Velo City. So if you spell Velo-City, it just looks like you put a dash in the middle of velocity, and people are like, you don't know how to spell. So that was like, that was my first lesson in marketing. Terrible marketer. So I was like, you know what? I want people to know who I am. I want them to know what I do. So Johansen baseball was born instantly. We changed the colors. I was like, I know why the Cubs are more popular than the Sox. It's, you know, it's the American flag colors. We're going to go red, white, and blue. Yep. And so boom, done. Like, from there, that's kind of where we ended up. And that's my background, I guess, on that. When we started Johansen baseball, we were renting space. And I realized very quickly that my equipment, if I'm not there, was going to be used, touched, ruined, destroyed. And then we bought a HitTrax, which obviously you guys have as well. And I was not willing to put that at risk. And that's how we got our own building. And then from there, it was like I just turned into an absolute psychopath and made terrible business decisions and bought way too much technology because I was curious. So the fact that you guys are, you know, don't model your business after mine. I will tell you that time and time again. Yeah, we have some of the coolest stuff. We got Vertec force plates, obviously HitTrax. We've had Rapsodo hitting units combined with HitTrax so we could see spin. We've got blast motion sensors. Yeah, we've got 3D motion capture. We've had KVS. We've had 4D motion. We've got the Synaptic Sensory Station. We utilize UHIT. We had Halo Neuro Science headphones. And we've got, 3 3-wheel machines for 2.5 cages, and one's a really short cage. So we literally have 3 machines for 1 cage, 2 spin balls and a Hack Attack Junior. And we use that to mix up sliders, fastballs, curveballs, whatever we can try to do. And both hands go up and you don't know what's coming, and we go down from there. So that's my background. Sorry if that was a little long-winded.
No, that's fine. That's one of the things that I've always been able to tell just based on your posts and interacting with you is that you have passion for what you're doing. And that's and probably in a good way what led you to continue to drive to do what you do, and also feel the need to provide your athletes with the best opportunity that they can to succeed when it comes to the technology that you use for the baseball and softball. And kind of getting into that, now that you kind of named all of those things, where do you see yourself kind of either using all of them? Are you kind of staying more with one versus the other? Like where do you fall on that spectrum?
No, that's a great question. Every piece is a piece of the puzzle. Every piece of the puzzle can be inferred, and by another piece, right? And so, like, if you take a puzzle and there's an empty piece, you can kind of tell like what's going to go in there. Especially if you have the picture on the box, you kind of know like what's supposed to fit in there. You don't necessarily know exactly what it's going to look like because there's still a hole. Maybe you haven't looked at that specific piece yet. Maybe you haven't aligned it the right way. But you can make inferences using less technology than using more. I think the way that we should use technology is to simplify our programming, not to find everything that's wrong. And so if we use all of the tools and we know what you're really good at, we should capitalize on that. And we should strategically plan your weaknesses without you as a player or ever knowing it, from that aspect. And that's going to come from constraint drills. That's going to come from our coaching cues and things like that. I think a lot of times us as coaches try to build coaches and not players. We tell them, and I'm big on context. I've got a podcast too where I talk about, Nate's way better at not providing context and just kind of going into it. Whereas I really, to create buy-in, I try to create context. And so a lot of times though, like the context has to be strategic for that player. Cause if you just give them all the information, you tell them they're really bad at 8 things, even though they're really good at really 4, then that's what makes them who they are. That's what makes them a Division I athlete. That's what makes them an all-star in their high school team. That's what makes them a professional player. They're going to try to go fix all those 8 because they don't want to be bad at anything because we're all competitors. And so we got to be really careful because when you fix those 8, you might ruin those 4. And if those 8 aren't really important, then you're going to be a worse player. And so there's a lot of times we can use technology to kind of, try to guard our weaknesses, and we should be capitalizing on our strengths. And there's ways to get a little bit better at our weaknesses to kind of move the needle a little bit, but we're not trying to just make these giant overhauls and hit metrics on an app. Like we're trying to get better on the field. Like if you're crushing baseballs or you're crushing softballs, I want to know what you're good at. And I want to know like what to get back to. A lot of times if we were to do these assessments and then you were to retest, people during a slump, the numbers are going to be very different. Like what if we just try to get them back to their baseline, and what they were doing when they were good? Have we ever tested guys or girls when they're really, really good, like in the middle of the season? Like we typically just test them in the off season. And so I think we need to know like what they're really good at, what they're doing when they're performing, and how to get them back there, as well as moving the needle. There's a lot of things. Like just because you're really, really good doesn't mean you can't get a little bit better. That might be the difference in being a 10th round pick and a first round pick. That might be the difference in, being an All-American and being like an honorable mention. Like I think that's kind of what we need to look at, but we can't put all of our eggs into the metrics basket of just, hey, every metric has to be perfect. And guys and girls are going to be different at different things. Like, individually, a power hitter might be really good at a certain aspect of blast, but, a contact hitter might not be. And you got to know your hitters and you got to know what they're good at. And you got to be able to kind of connect with them on that way and build context for them. So I don't know if that really – I tried to answer your question. I think I went a little on a tangent, so I apologize. I'm terrible at tangents, by the way, so this might be a little rough.
No, I think the tangents are informative, and that's how your brain is working. So that's perfectly fine. I think that what you're kind of getting at is that we have to make sure that we're not just focusing purely on the numbers and trying to get everyone to what maybe is an elite number for one person, but maybe isn't for another on a certain metric, using the different technologies or the different machines, right? and trying to focus on driving the positives, and still at the same time trying to work on the negatives, but also not letting everybody just be hyper focused on what they're not good at.
Yeah, absolutely. And the best example I can think of is force plate data for this. I guess let me use HitTrax data. A lot of times we'll have a guy who's really, really good at line drive percentage, and we're like, your exit velocity could be better. And, maybe hits a new peak on exit velocity, but his line drive percentage is incredibly low. If he's very close to the season, that's probably the wrong approach. If he's far away from the season and we have an ability to say like, hey, what's your max and how can we make your max consistent? And it's like October and his first game is going to be February or March, which obviously this year is a little different. And we've got 5-6 months to work on that. That's fine. That's a great time to challenge yourself and learn how to get better. But I think a lot of people, and this is I think where HitTrax, gets a bad name. And, whether it's your area, our area, wherever, people say like HitTrax is ruining swings. First of all, HitTrax is a piece of metal that has hockey boards and cameras attached to it. HitTrax can't do anything to your swing. It just sits in the cage, whether it's now they've got the cool ones that can go above and all the other stuff. Like it can't touch your swing. Yeah. So how we're kind of utilizing that, goes from a different phase. And I think having periodization for failure is okay. Like it's okay when your line drive percentage goes down if that's what you're working on in that period of time. But you have to have a series or a period where you blend it back into hard hit average, line drive, HHA, or no, what's the HitTrax number? Why can't I think of it? HLP, right? Line drive plus hard hit, or LDH. Sorry, LDH, line drive plus hard hit. There we go. Okay. Sorry. From that aspect. So kind of like knowing what metric you're trying to hit and understanding that it's not going to just go like linearly. It's going to go like this, and then it's going to zigzag, and then it's going to kind of like maybe plateau off, and then knowing what you're going to do next. And it's all going to be cyclical. There's going to be these cycles that are going to go through, from season to season on what you want to do and how you want to do it on that aspect. So, yeah, I guess that's
definitely
my topic.
The other thing was that maybe what I found personally is that when you first get, especially several years ago, getting the HitTrax, as an instructor, you're evolving over time too, because it's not just like you're getting in there, and that's where you can sometimes get the bad. HitTrax can get the bad rap about just trying to see how hard you can hit the ball, how far you can hit the ball, when that's not what we're trying to look at. We're trying to see different things and utilize the metrics to help guide on working on some different things to make a hitter a more complete player. And that's where we always have to remember and remind people that that's not what we're doing. We're not just going in there trying to hit cage bombs, right? And then say, okay, the hitter is fixed, or the hitter's good.
Absolutely. And it depends on the environment. So for us, our facility purpose, and we do mainly groups, but I think makes this easier. We used to do the one-on-one lessons, and we made a giant mistake of what we should have done is we should have had the option of doing groups, being in our group, and then also doing a one-on-one lesson. We really would try to be cost effective from a modeling standpoint, and understanding that like the amount of time we wanted to like have these players, we wanted them to lift. We wanted the left fielder to do arm care. We wanted, all this other stuff. Like we wanted the left fielder to be able to get add 5 to 7 miles an hour to his throw, so we get a cool outfield assist. You know what I mean? Like we weren't just like doing that. And so where I think, for us, and I'm telling you this I have a reason for this. I'm sorry. But I'm telling you all this because when we first got into it, we were doing the one-on-one lessons, that's, we're testing it off the tee. And then we're testing off flips, and then we're testing off maybe, BP or short arm, and then we're testing off the machine. The way that we do it now is all the data for the last 6 months. So when you look up, like just click last 6 months and you're looking for all that's done over high velo for that particular player. So if it's a 12U player, maybe it's 60, 65 with also a hammer, because we've got three machines back there. Yep. Maybe it's something else. So we try to test only in a game environment, and then we're only tracking in a game environment, which HitTrax itself does a really good job, because you can, and obviously you guys use it, so you guys know, but you guys can delineate 15 to 20 miles an hour and all the way down to 75 to 70 miles an hour, 70, 75 miles an hour from there. From a reporting standpoint for us, when we moved into our groups, is we only are testing in that. And what we'll do is we'll keep entertainment mode on during our weird drills. So, I mean, really without hit tracks, like, I think Chad Longworth talks about this too. I think I actually stole this line from him. Without hit tracks, like, I'm just a dude with really weird drills. Like,
no, but that's good though. You're getting the feedback, even on the drills. And that's actually a great idea for the entertainment mode. Cause sometimes we'll just pause it during so it doesn't really help from getting their exit velo or to see where the ball is necessarily going. So that's actually a great idea that we'll have to start implementing, because you do want to see, and then it ends up going on their profile. And now all of a sudden if they're doing a drill, then it ends up bringing down their numbers. So it ends up being hard to track a little bit. So I totally understand what you're saying there.
Yeah, and we use like plow balls and tennis balls. Tennis balls are kind of fun to hit. I had this theory that if we hit lacrosse balls, we were going to get exit velocities off the roof. Lacrosse balls spin off the bat so crazy. Like, it was like so counterproductive to what I thought was going to happen. It was the most disappointing night ever. And me and Nate were like entertainment mode, like at like midnight, and like everyone left. Yeah, we've done like we work late. Our college guys are savages. They stay out and hit forever. I'm like, dude, I have to go home. Like,
yeah,
stop.
no, I know. I've got.
That's it.
I get the phone call from the wife asking where I am sometimes. But so as far as if we can just jump, because it's a unique situation right now, what do you think would be the best recommendation for the parents and the kids and coaches that are listening that they could be doing right now during the lockdown?
For me, it would depend on what they want to get better at and where they were. So to kind of echo what I was talking about at the very beginning of the call, like, I would treat this like this is in season. If it's something that, if you do nothing and then you go, like, let's just assume, for example, you do absolutely nothing. You play Call of Duty all day. You're like the best on your team in Call of Duty. You go like 20-3 like every time, or whatever else. From there, you dominate the show, whatever. You don't pick up a bat. You don't pick up a ball, and then you go and you get the call like, hey, we got practice today. Like, governor said we're good to go. From that aspect, and you haven't done anything, and then your coach is like, dude, I was on all these Zoom calls and I heard like weighted bats. That's it, man. Overload weighted bats. And you pick them up and you're like, I haven't done anything. And they're like, swing this really heavy bat like 100 times. Like, you're not going to feel very good and you're not going to perform very well. So the big thing for me is, like, I'm huge on dry swings. I'm huge on mirror work. I like the tee. I think there's a place for the tee. I'm biased towards the backspin tee. If I had to pick one, I'm not going to say one's right or wrong. I'm saying I have a bias and a preference towards it. If I were to do a tee, otherwise, I really like mirror work. I really like dry work. I really like trying to feel and develop what's called, I'm sure you guys talk about in your facility, proprioception, or basically the awareness of your body. Yep. That's how I'd be spending my time, and I'd be doing a lot of dry swing work. If I was a guy who, maybe I'm a smaller guy and I knew that going into the season I was going to struggle with power, I'd be working on dry swings to develop power. If I knew I was a guy which is going to be high intent, it's going to be overload, underload, things like that you can do just dry. There's no distraction in the baseball. You're just building your engine. If I'm a guy who I knew, like, I have a ton of power, but I've really struggled with my mechanics, or I've really struggled with my path, I'm going to stand in front of a mirror and I'm going to really try to, like, go slow, and I'm going to try to understand, like, where my barrel is when I feel what I feel. And I'm going to try to turn feel into real. My first thing for me is, the closer I can get my feel to my real, the more coachable I become throughout all this stuff. We say all these coaching cues as coaches, and I might say stay inside the ball, and the three of us might have a different definition. I say stay through the ball, and the three of us might have a different definition. There might be something that I say that you guys are like, that's not a thing, or vice versa. And so that's kind of where, the more you can use the mirror to really feel what you're doing from a motor learning standpoint and just understanding what you're trying to do. And then if you needed power, then go from there. And you can do all kinds of things. If your dad's willing to throw you front toss, like, go in the mirror and then challenge yourself in front toss or flips, or go out in the field if there's a park open. And everyone's situation is going to be different. Not everyone's going to have access to all these different things, but that's how I would balance it. But I would not sit at home and do nothing. at the same time, I wouldn't stress and think I'm like competing with all these people that like are going to all of a sudden like just surpass me. Like nobody's going to make giant gains. They're either going to maintain or they're going to put themselves at risk. In my opinion, that's my opinion.
No, that definitely makes sense. Now, I did know that you had a couple things that you wanted to possibly show us or go into. Is that possible to do right now? I'm not really sure which direction you wanted to take it at this point.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping the question would lead us to there.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
fine.
have anything like specific. I had a bunch of presentations up just in case it went there. I don't know if a question's led there yet, but let me I can let me see what I got.
All right, while you're setting that up, I think that one of the things that we can look at and is if people do go on is looking at how hitting is being taught right now in terms of if you can kind of touch on this really quick, is you have an old school approach versus somewhat of a new school approach, and then you have some people on one end, some people on the other, and then some people in the middle. So I was just curious if you could give us your opinion on when you end up with the battle with the two different sides.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you guys see my screen by chance? There's thumbs up, or I guess, yeah, I can hear you guys. So yeah, there's, you guys see it or no?
Yeah,
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, perfect. So a couple different things. These are quotes, from other people. And this is one of the parts of the presentation I give. I'm not a huge fan of the term old school, new school, modern. I think we have to understand that like coaches develop their philosophies based on who they work with. Imagine if I worked with like just a bunch of really fast guys that had great, like all I ever worked with were really fast guys that had great barrel control. And like all of them, let's say like 3 of them got drafted because they were just incredibly fast. And that was like my first experience as a coach. I would probably like really value speed. And I would probably be like, no, like the game's changing. Like, I don't understand. Like, this is important, things like that. If I was a coach that just worked with a bunch of donkeys and they just hit a bunch of homers and they got drafted, then I'd be like, you guys just aren't strong enough. You just need to get stronger, things like that. So I think when we talk about like coming to the middle, like we just have to understand that there's different reasons for people that perform, and we have to be open-minded and know like we have our strengths and our weaknesses as coaches, and we need to surround ourselves with people who are really good at developing different areas. And I think it's really tough because there's all this talk. I've seen my least favorite thing, even outside of old school, new school, is swing coaches versus hitting coaches. Like, what is a swing coach? Like, what is that guy trying to teach? Like, he's trying to teach them a swing to hit the ball better. And there's times when your mechanics are not helping you be consistent and helping you square up the ball. Like, there's times when your movements like just suck.
Yep.
And there's also times when like your timing's just off. And there's times when if you just fix your timing, all of your movements improve. So the first thing to know is like, can you move that way? That's my first question. Can you move that way? If you can move that way, I'm good. So I've got these check boxes with all of our tools and all of our resources. If you can check the boxes in certain environments, I know that I need to work on your timing and I need to work on the mental side. If you can't check these boxes and you're like, that might be the first thing I look at, but it also might not be. Are you close enough to those boxes to where I'm like, I want to work on it, but like your timing, like you just don't touch baseballs? And then there's the cognitive side. What's your cognitive response time? Do you make decisions fast enough? Do you make accurate decisions fast enough? Do you like hem and haw? Are you on offense? Or do you play defense when you're in the batter's box? And I think that's a big thing that has been ingrained to our kids. And that's kind of why I wanted to pull up this slide, if you guys can see it.
Sure.
Yep,
they can see it.
I was standing in a parking lot when I heard this first one. I was by Rich Benjamin, who's now now he's the head coach at Indiana Wesleyan. He was the head coach at Judson University when he told me this. And the first year he went to Indiana Wesleyan, he had no recruiting class. He got hired in like late July, early August. He just had to go through the fall and go. The previous year they hit 3 home runs. When I talked to him in that spring that spring, they had played 28 games and they hit 33 home runs. So with the same exact staff, the same exact players, they went from 3 home runs to 33 home runs in 28 games. They weren't even done with their season yet. And this is what he told me in that parking lot. This is kind of what was like, I need to change the way I think. Dominicans are trying to hit the ball off the island, and we're telling our kids not to strike out. So we put our kids automatically from a youth perspective into the defensive mode when we're on offense. When we're standing in the batter's box, we're trying to score runs. Like we talk about it like, okay, well, how do we score runs? We have to get on base. Then we have to move guys over. Then we have to get them all the way around the bases. But like we have to understand, like if we're scared of messing up, we're not on offense. And so the pitcher dictates everything. So we have to find a way to take that dictative approach kind of back into our own hands and being aggressive and doing that. And I'm not saying like hit homers all the time. Oops. For some reason, Siri recorded a lot of that. Sorry. But I'm not saying like just try to like hit pull side nukes. Like that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying like we have to have – this was a quote that, you know, really made me realize is that here in America, like we don't set our kids up for success. And, you know, there's a lot of guys who can slow down and control the barrel and do things. And then the second quote is from another guy who said horsepower first, control second. If you try to, you know, and I grew up in this. I grew up in like, hey, if you don't try to hit homers, like you're going to hit homers. But if you try to hit homers, you're going to strike out. Oh, yeah. And then like one time I got really mad and I tried to hit a homer and I hit one. And I was like, whoa, like, that's weird. And then, you know, the next time I apparently got too big and struck out, but I was like 2 for 4 on the day with a double and a homer. Like, would be like, okay, that's a great day. Yeah. And so, you know, that's kind of where, you know, that's kind of where some of my ideas come from and some from new school and old school. But it's not about just trying to hit pull side nukes. It's about knowing what you're really good at and being on offense. And I think this quote is really, really important because we try not to fail instead of try to succeed. If you're really good at hitting like absolute missiles to the oppo gap, like you should go up there and be like, I'm going to hit a missile, the oppo gap, like good luck. Not like, oh man, I got to see it deep. Like if I don't want to be out in front, like if I try to be out in front, I'm going to hook one. I'm going to roll over the third baseman. Okay. You lost. You're already like in a hole. If you go up there and you're like, I'm really good at hitting pull side nukes and you try to hit a pull side nuke, like you're confident in that, like your belief in what you try to do is probably going to happen. And so, you know, if you are self-aware of your skill set and you can manage to do that on offense and not be scared, I guess that's what that quote really means to me and how we bridge the gap, because our technology can tell us what we're good at. And our technology can tell us what we're not good at, or what players are not good at, and where they need maybe some more work. And so that's kind of, I guess, you know, my mindset on old school versus new school. I think there's a lot of old school guys that try to hit the absolute crap out of the ball and were really confident and really had a lot of belief in what they did. And there's a lot of really athletic guys who compensated well with cues that won't work, you know, with a majority of players who, you know, our travel baseball and youth baseball is just a bunch of dads yelling at dudes. I mean, like that can't be that can't be helpful.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that we try to preach is intent too. And that kind of ties into what you were just talking about, right? We want our players to have the intent that they're going to go up and do something positive and get into their own mindset that they're going to be successful at what they do well. And then if you have that intent to do damage and then maybe you don't quite get there, then you have a much higher basement as opposed to limiting yourself into what you can do by going up and thinking about doing something that's maybe not quite at the elite level that you could do. And I think that that's a huge part in the mental side of hitting as well.
Yeah, and I think that's also, you know, we talked about periodizations and cycles of training and things like that. Like that's where HitTrax gets a bad name. You see these guys up there trying to hit the ball off the island. And they're like, what can my exit velocity be? What can my distance be? And like, you can always slow down after that. But if you don't know your limit, like if you don't know what you can get to, how do you train? How do you stay relaxed? How do you know, like, okay, take a breath. Like I don't need to go that hard. But if you're, and then again, like if your peak, let's say your peak exit velocity is, you know, 95 and you want to train at, you know, just for easy math, let's use your peak exit velocity is 100. And you want to play at 90% of your effort level. and you can consistently hit the ball 90 miles an hour at playing at 90%. And that's your consistent level. Like not an average exit velocity of 90 miles an hour is like really good at any level.
Yep.
And so you have to understand like where that's at and like what effort level you need to play at, like plays really well. And so if your peak though is like 85 and you want to play at 90%, like that's tough. Like good luck. Like you have to sell out more often than the other guy. And like you have to guess right in a lot more pitches. Than the guy whose peak is 100.
Sure.
So I think that's kind of where, the horsepower first, control second. You have to understand who you are as a hitter and what you're trying to do and the level you're playing at, like don't put too much pressure on yourself to be at 100, 105 if you're not playing at a level where that's like necessary. But at the same time, like for me, like I push guys, like I assume they want to be at the next level. So we kind of like try to compete and like play at that next level. But at the same time, we're not mandating it, necessarily. It's something where like each guy's different and you got to know like where those guys are at. So I think we could have a really long discussion on how to blend kind of the old versus the new. I think there's a lot of really, really, really smart approach guys out there. I mean, one of the best pitch tunneler approach coaches I've ever met, didn't even know there was slow motion on his iPhone this year. I mean, he was like, or no, it was an iPad. It was an iPad Pro. It was like it was like $1,000 iPad. And he's like, dude, did you know this has slow motion on it? I was like, dude, the iPhone 5 had slow motion on it. What are you talking about? And he's like one of the best approach guys I've ever talked to ever. And he's like not that old. And so that's kind of like, talk about pitch tunneling, and he understands axis of pitches now. And, he's really taught himself and like caught this up. Like to me, like that's the blend. Like this dude's done nothing but baseball and he was a catcher. So like you talk about like where balls are coming from and like where to look and how to like understand tunnels and what you're sitting. Yeah, like that's unbelievable experience.
So I think if you could speak on this too, because we have a great example of this would be the parent, the kid, and the coach who are watching MLB Network or ESPN or something like that, and then they have a hitter who had a lot of success when they were playing. And then they do the what they're demonstrating, bringing the knob straight down and coming across the body. And then you can look at the video of them completely not doing that. That sends mixed messages a lot of times. And I think it makes it a very difficult thing for parents and coaches and even the kids to understand. Do I listen to A-Rod when he's talking what he's talking, or do I watch his video when I go back and watch him swing?
Yeah, I think you have to understand, like, do you want to put your dead tree where the ball of yarn is, or do you want to swing like A-Rod? And if you want to swing like A-Rod, like you might miss a lot, or you might be really good. I think if you swing like A-Rod, like he actually swings, you'll probably be pretty good, assuming you perceive pitches the same way that he did as well. But you can hit a lot of balls really far with suboptimal mechanics. And I think we forget that we're trying to hit baseballs and we're not trying to have perfect swings. And I understand, because this is the data perspective, right? Like, let's work backward from what's important. And there's certain concepts, like we always talk about like concepts over mechanics. We don't talk about like, hey, these are a couple absolutes, because you have to be malleable, like in your move. If you don't have, in one of the last conversations we had before we got sent over from Arizona was like, I literally said, what if you guys are talking about like a big move, not like making guys like inconsistent, but you're also talking about one of the best players in our organization having a giant move and how he's really consistent and really adjustable. What if for the players who make the right move for their body have more room for error when they go? Like, what if a bigger move allows you more time and more things to move around to be adjustable in your swing? And I'm not saying everybody's like that, but I'm saying like, what if? And a lot of coaches automatically assume if you're a swing and miss guy, that you have too big of a move. Well, what if there's other things that are going? And that's where the technology kind of comes into play. And you got to know what you're good at. If you're really good, with bat speed, and you're really good with rotational acceleration, but your connection starting from up here, like you're not going to be very consistent. If you have really good connection and your on plane percentage is really good, and you're still not making contact, you're probably just late. And there's all these different things. But I also want to know like what environments are being tested and what was the pitch beforehand, and what were you thinking, and how did you get set up? Like, did you change your approach because you just got a two seam that ran in on your hands, and then you got a slider? Like, if I'm gauging your metrics or gauging your performance on just that slider, like, oh, this is what you did in the slider. And a lot of times coaches, and I think parents, try to do that too. On this pitch, do this. On that pitch, do this. On this pitch, do this. Like, you don't have time to process that. And kids who are trying to think about, like, okay, if it's this, then I'll do that, like, they're late. And then when they're late, nothing good happens. And then we go back into search mode. We go back into tinker mode. We go back into thinking, and then we continue to be late. Instead of just understanding, like, sometimes I'm going to miss. My body's not going to solve the movement solution correctly. And I have to understand that, like, I've got to have certain concepts that put me in the best place to be consistent. But I know that I'm going to look like this sometime. I'm going to look like these guys on the screen sometimes, and that's okay. And I think that I call it the van conversation. You know, when you get, how did you swing at that ball in the dirt? Like, I almost hit a double, but it just nicked off my bat like an inch lower, and I was like a little bit wrong because it was kind of a good slider, and now I grounded out to third base. Like, I'm sorry.
No,
sorry, my front leg was bent. Like, my bad.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And that's where being able to have the internal cueing to go back to what made you successful to begin with, and realize that baseball and softball are hard, and you're not going to be able to be successful and not going ahead and changing things after, like you said, if somebody throws you a really nasty pitch and you swing and miss. And then sometimes we focus a little bit more on, if we go 1 for 4 and ballot it up 3 times, but only go 1 for 4, and we focus on the really negative stuff, as opposed to focusing on what we did well, and then understanding how the game is played.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want like listeners to think I don't care about mechanics. Like, obviously, like with all the technology we use, we have certain standards, and we have things like we look at, and there's also this other slide where we like have certain things that, you know, we check our boxes. And I like this slide the best because this is Josh Donaldson, who talks about, you know, trying to get under the ball and lift it. And then you got Mike Trout, who talks about trying to get on top, and they're very, very similar. So I think that goes, you know, us as coaches and parents, we have to try to go make feel real first and adjust from there, you know, and then that's a constant adjustment to me, in my opinion. And that's where the technology also comes into play, because, you know, we have a guy, for example, that we try to have him think his path is this. We have the A-Rod conversation. I'm like, dude, don't tell anybody we told you this. This is our little secret. Like, this is what I want you to try to do. And he lives there. I mean, his attack angle, his on-plane percentage improves. Like, he's right here. But at some point, that may change into getting from here to here to here to here, and he's going to wonder why he's chopping out. And it's just he's going to get better at the task that he's trying to do. And that's where Blast comes in. It's going to tell us every day. And so his thought may have to change. So these pro guys that talk on Twitter and they talk on social media about, like, my thought had to change every day, like, they're not wrong. We can just, like, maybe get your thought to change a second earlier and, like, avoid the slump that made you change your thought.
Yeah. No, I hear you. That definitely makes sense. Is there anything else you wanted to jump into? I'm going to change the subject a little bit. Is there anything else you wanted to do on this?
No, man. No, I'm gonna stop sharing right now so we can get back to this. But yeah, no, we'll see if there's another presentation. I guess you go from there. So yeah, we're good. Yeah, let's change the subject.
So here's someone who asked if you had a preference on leg kicks, short stride, long stride, just how people start their stride, I guess, just in general.
Great question. I made a post about probably 3 years ago. Sorry to move. I got to plug my computer in so I don't lose you guys. But about 3 years ago, there's like top 5 hitters who were in WAR, and they all had different loading mechanisms. I think like 2 of them had a leg kick. So maybe not all of them, but it was basically the majority of them. There was no uniform way of kind of doing these things. The leg kick, to me, if you can't stand on one foot and balance for a certain amount of time, like, you probably shouldn't leg kick. Like, if you can't balance, like standing still, like, how are you going to control your center of mass going forward? And that kind of goes to like some of the mobility screens and things like that we can kind of test for. You know, a toe tap for me, actually, you know what? I will share this part aspect. I think this is what I like about a leg kick, and we kind of a little bit alluded to it in terms of like room for error. But if you can't balance, then it's going to be really, really challenging on this side of things. So it might not let me play these two. It's not going to let me play the videos. Essentially what they are is both these players, they have their leg kick, they step up. I'm gonna stand up. It's going to be. So what it is they stand up, and there's one video. Sorry, my dog's in the way. It's Gunner.
It's all right.
So as he comes forward, there's one video where he gets to here. The other video the other video is he comes here and he's like, oh crap, I'm too early, and he pauses, and then he gets to here. And when we pause the videos, both those two guys hit the hardest balls they'd ever hit in the facility, which is why I highlighted them. And it was captured. That was obviously hit tracks. If you guys, recognize the camera on that side of things. So one is just here, boom, really hard hit ball. The next one was boom, oh crap, I'm too early, and then get to the exact same spot. Do you have room to adjust in your swing? If you have room and you have the balance and you have the dynamic balance to kind of get to those positions, I'm good with it. But you don't need a leg kick for power. Like, your power is not coming from like how high you lift your leg. And I can tell you on 3D motion capture and force plates, like, that's not adding to anything. That's simply a timing mechanism that matches your body type. And if it helps you make a bigger move because you're hypermobile, but a lot of times hypermobile guys like also don't have like the stability to stay balanced there. So especially at a younger age, and that depends on your level. If you're a guy that wants to challenge that and you like that time mechanism, I think it's one of the most efficient time mechanisms that exists. But so many people are like, you'll never catch up to the fastball, or you're going to be out in front, or you're going to do this stuff. Like, challenge it when you're young. One of the guys, I have a guy who's probably going to get drafted, who I told him when he was 14, like, you need to treat every at bat this year like it's literally batting practice. He's like, what? I was like, dude, yeah, like, you need to treat every at bat like it's batting practice. Like, this year doesn't matter for you. No one's going to ever ask you your 14U stats. And he's like probably going to be a draft pick. And he was a guy that had a leg kick, and he was able to do these things. And he was kind of goofy, and he was rumbly and tumbly, and he was slow at first. But you kind of see some of these traits in some of these guys, and he's probably going to get drafted. And this whole situation maybe changes that for him, but he's young enough to where he can, continue to go to college and do some other stuff, and he's still probably going to end up in the league at some point.
Sure. So do you think it's trial and error in terms of finding a leg kick? Like, is that where you go back to your machines and you have guys see if they can get off the ground on time? Or is there any way you can work on that in the off season without having to wait until you start to play and then you're like, oh crap, this isn't working, I'm not ready? Like, where do you find that that balance on getting the leg kick that's right for each player?
Yeah.
Do you hear that?
Can you guys hear me? Chopped up a little bit.
Yeah, I said, is it trial and error, or like, where do you find that balance instead of having to be like, okay, I feel great during the off season, and then I go to my first couple games and it's like, oh crap, I'm not right? Is it a thing where you want guys to stick with it or girls to stick with it, or is it like, how do you challenge that in the off season so that way they're ready when they go to play?
So my rule of thumb for the machine is that if you can't control your forward move on a machine, the fact that it just shoots out at you is irrelevant. I want you to be able to control your center of mass. I want you to be able to really control your body. And I want you to understand your own personal timing method to make your normal swing. There's a lot of guys who just kind of sit their foot down. They don't take a stride. They just wait for it to come out, and they just do half their swing. And they're saying like, oh, it's a machine. That's what I have to do. But then what's the point of doing that? You're just working on path at that point.
Right. I'm going to jump in really quick here, only because there are so many people, you're kind of bringing it up right now. So many people don't like hitting off the machine, or they think it's bad. Can you speak on that a little bit? Is that something you guys are doing at the professional level? And obviously you think it's useful. So can you speak on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple different things. There are players at our facility who grew up with machines who are better machine hitters than some guys who play in the pros. But what I will tell you is guys who don't like the machines in the pros have giant swing flaws. And if they don't like them and they can perform on them, that's different. But guys who simply just can't perform on them typically have other issues going on. And some of the issues, and when they can't perform on them, some of the issues are just their belief. Like, they just assume they're going to suck, or they're pissed off that they're on a machine. So it's not that they can't perform, it's that they're not in that environment, which I think a lot of times happens. But you should be able to hit off a machine. There's no reason that any ball coming towards you without enough sample size, especially to, like, I tell our guys, like, if you can't figure it out after 3, there's an issue, and we talk about maybe why, and then we kind of go in the cage. A lot of times I go off the machine. I'll actually load with them. So I'll stand across from them, whether they're right-handed or left-handed. I'll stand in the batter's box. The guy puts his hand up like he's gonna, feed the machine. I'm like, look, like, when do you have to get started? When do you have to get down by? And I'll walk out to the middle. And I'll say, when does your foot have to get down? And I'll say this, okay? And they'll say, so I have to rush my front foot? I'm like, no. Why would you rush your swing? I'm not telling you to rush your swing. When do you have to get started? So we'll actually like do this whole visual thing, and or I'll like literally walk out from the machine too, and I'll say, when does your foot need to get down? When do you want to make your decision, which are two different things, and when do you want to get your swing off? Yep. And so you need to start at a time, if the guy's like this and he's just feeding it in, like you might have to turn your leg kick into a toe tap if you can't balance. But if you can't balance like that, you probably shouldn't have a leg kick anyways. If you can balance, then you're just kind of up waiting, and maybe you start really early. And so I think there's a lot of different things that can kind of impact how you view the machine, but there's nothing to be scared of the machine. Like I really think if you've got really good self-awareness and really good proprioception, that you should be able to hit off the machine. If you don't have that, practice more so you can gain it. Yeah. If you can hit off the machine, there's no reason you can't hit off of this and the guy who tries to quick pitch you. Like, you have to be able to have adjustable timing mechanisms, and all you have to know is when to start. You don't have to slow down. You don't have to speed it up. You have to know when to start. And if you can really figure out when to start, your timing and adjustability, no matter what your mechanics are, is going to be amazing, way better.
No, that's really good stuff. And I hear that all the time, just as far as excuses when it comes to hitting off machines. But it is a challenge, and it's a different constraint that allows guys to kind of work on, and girls to work on certain things. Just to take it a little bit of a different direction, if there were maybe three or 1 to 3 drills that you think, I know everybody's a little bit different, so each player is going to kind of dictate this, but if there were 3 drills that the people who are listening today that could come away with, or even one, if you think it's just one, just pick one and then kind of say why.
Oof. Wow.
Well, you see so much out there on social media, right? If you're looking through this stuff, and sometimes you can, as a hitter, get information overload where, oh, I need to try that one, or oh, I need to try that, or you know what I mean? So it's all over the place in terms of the stuff that's out there.
Let me do this in terms of environments, because I think movements and I think feels and I think things can be so different for different people. I think plows is one of my top drills. So somebody put out the other day, like 1 through 9, and it was all these different things that you could pick. It was like a T. There was like overload, underload bats. Maybe you guys saw my answer. I picked the spin ball machine. So 3-wheel machine that can throw anything. I've had that machine up to 118. You can trick it and turn the wheels, and really because they speed up when they try to change direction. And so if you put the ball in the right way, it's 118. I don't recommend actually doing it with the hitter in there because you don't know where the ball is going to go, but it's really fun if you have the radar on the wall and you want to see if you can get up to 118. Yeah, so spin ball, because, we're in the Midwest, similar to you guys, like Northeast, like baseball, we've got to simulate live somehow. We can't just blow out arms. At some point, like, I don't throw hard enough anymore. Like, I'm going to walk a bunch of guys too. I'm keeping on my skill set of dotting up and things like that. So the machine, you can really control that. The other thing I picked was plyos. I really like plyos. We've tested so many drills. I really like open side and closed side angle plyos. So basically standing too far to the left or too far to the right and really just trying to hit homers over the center field wall. And that's really my cue for that. It's going to help us maintain direction. It's going to help us with our pelvis. It's going to help us self-organize if we actually can control our pelvis. And then it's a really good conversation for guys if they just can't feel it, but they can do it. Then you can test them and say, hey, can you actually, can you control your pelvis in this direction? Can you control it this way? Can you control it this way? And then if you can, okay, now we need to do it in this drill. We need to focus on home runs over the center field wall. That cleans up so much stuff from a simplicity standpoint. And the other thing I would say would be like long bats, like really, really long bats or skinny bats. I really like the Great Lakes trainers. We use Great Lakes for both. We've got a 36 Great Lakes trainer, and we've got game weight small barrels. So what he does is he makes these really skinny bats. He puts weights in them, and then we hit tennis balls and plyo balls at the top of the zone. That really helps us with kind of cues to hit line drives through the batter's eye. So not over the batter's eye, they're through the batter's eye. So with kind of cueing and creating all these different environments, we accomplish all these goals. We accomplish being able to have a quality path to the bottom of the zone. We challenge our path at the top of the zone. And we're really trying to be in control of ourselves with the machine. So that's kind of my three things that I picked for, through, if I'm going to pick three drills. There's movement stuff. We have a whole drill library. If you just go to, you'll see kind of what's important to me on the movement prep side, and different things with big paragraphs each next to each video.
You have stuff on your website, right? Is that what you were going to say?
Yeah, so at johansenbaseball.com, if you go to our drill library, there's videos of me looking really terrible, and then there's paragraphs of what it should look like, and how to kind of accomplish that. It's actually the best our drill library's ever been. We updated that this offseason. The big problem in the past was we had all these just random videos, and we're like calling these different drills. And people were like, well, why would I do this one? Why would I do that one? And so what we try to do is we try to pick a couple staples that we thought were really important and could fix, or kind of not fix, but like address certain things you might want to do in your swing. And we put paragraphs next to it that kind of outlined, like, this is why I would do this drill. And I will say this, because I just caught myself. There's nothing to fix in your swings. There are only things to add. You can add space. You can add a move. You can add, if it's something you're trying to take away, if you're like too big, what I would say is you would add, like an elbow tuck instead of like giant scapula, or you would add something, it's always an addition. It's never a subtraction. It's never a fix. We're never trying, like, your swing will play. I guarantee you've gotten a hit with whatever swing you have. And so being consistent with that and trying to make it more consistent, we want to add things, but your swing's not broken. So many times as hitters, they get in the cage and they're like, what do I need to fix? And I'm sure you guys have had it as coaches too. Like, coach, what did I do wrong on that one? Like, you didn't put your bat where the ball was. Like, that's the first thing you did wrong. Like, you were really late. You were really early. And I will say too, and like, we train bat speed and we train power and we train some of this stuff. The first swings are rollovers. And then what do coaches say? They say, when you swing too hard, you roll over. Like, dude, my bat speed increased by 5 to 7 miles an hour because I tried to swing harder. I was a little early. I don't know how to control that bat speed in my first 3 swings of me trying to, like, it's something new to me. Imagine like when you hit the gas pedal on a car and it goes like, it like jumps on you. Like, you're not going to control it the very first like time you do it. And that, what I mean from that aspect. So I think there's all this context that goes into it because it makes sense. That's what you see with your eyes. Oh, you overswung, you rolled over. Well, it's not that I overswung. It's that I was actually faster and I got there earlier. And I watched a guy literally hold the computer up to a former professional, and he has his computer, he has his K-vest on, and the guy rolls over on a ball, and the guy's staring at the computer screen, didn't see the results. All his K-vest stuff pops up. Oh, dude, you're so much faster. Good job. And the guy's like, what? I rolled over. And so, like, you have to feel this stuff too. Like that guy didn't want to hear he did a good job there. Like, what kind of credibility is he going to have with that guy? Like you're staring at a computer screen, told me you did a good job. Like, lift up your head. I rolled over to second base. Like, what did I do there? And so I think there's context there. He was the degrees. The guy looking at the computer wasn't wrong. It was better on the K-vest graph, but because it was so much faster, he didn't understand how to control that yet. It was literally the first time he was faster of all those swings. Yeah. So the adjustment actually was effective. Now it was like, okay, wait like 2 more seconds and get used to the speed that you have. I mean, if I try to drive a Ferrari at 200 miles an hour right now, it's going to be a little wobbly, but give me a day or two and I'm going to figure it
out. Good answer. I did have a question here from someone that said, what age group is the hardest to get through or work with? The younger 9-year-old or the pro guy who got to the level he's been doing what he's been doing?
It's a really good question. I'm going to give you probably not the answer you want to hear. Our job as coaches is to be everybody's assistant. So I would say the young guys, because it's easier for us to spot like major problems with them. It's also easier for us to like understand that like they're not at the cognitive level necessarily to like really be really self-aware of where they're at, where like pro guys are. And pro guys also like they're adults. Like, there's some guys that are like 30, like 31, 32, like, are older than me. And like they have to like they have really strong beliefs. And we have to understand that like the biggest thing in hitting is like having belief. And I will tell you, like, the worst move, the worst cues, stuff that makes you want to cringe, like, plays really well in certain guys because they just have belief in it and because they're that good of athletes. And I guess at the youth level, it's really hard because they really haven't developed that yet. And they're looking for information, but we have to do a way better job of guiding them to figure it out for themselves. And that's really challenging sometimes because we also have to be comfortable with them failing. we have to be way more comfortable with them failing than we are with the pro guys failing. And that's really, really hard. Especially if we want them to have long-term success and based on their goals. Like I had a kid who was like 12. It's like my number one goal is to go to Vanderbilt. Like, I was like, dude, that you're kind of early to like have like that kind of crazy goal. Like that's like, you know how hard it is to get into Vanderbilt? He's like, no, I understand. Like everything I do, I want to go to Vanderbilt. I'm like, okay, you realize like you probably won't go to Vanderbilt, but like we're going to do everything in our power and make that assumption that like you maybe can. Like I'm not going to make any promises to you, but like you understand like where you're at, like what you're doing. And he was super self-aware. And ever since then, like he's grinded and like maybe he will go to Vanderbilt at this point. Like he's really made a ton of progress, but like he's probably going to like he's shooting for the stars. He's going to land among the clouds. Like, you know, shoot for the moon, land among the stars, whatever. Like, he's probably going to be a D1 athlete. Like that's pretty impressive. Like when you talk about 1 or 2% because of how he was able to do that. And so many young kids, they're not even thinking that yet. Like they're just like, hey, I just want my friends not to be mad at me when I strike out in the 7th and we like lose the game by 1 with a runner on 3rd.
Yeah.
Like, how do you teach that guy like the context of what that situation is, and also the power of what his development is and what he did in that situation? Was he just trying to be liked by his friends, and was that the best thing for his development? Because in some cases, like you don't know what's going on in that kid's life. Like we have to be these kids' assistants, and we have to be these pro guys' assistants. And no matter what their age is as coaches, we only get paid and we only have jobs and we only get to wear cool hats all the time. We only get to wear cool chains. And we only get to be on the field in the grass because players play the game. This is all about them. 100% about them. Like youth coaches don't get to do cool travel programs. We don't get to run facilities. We don't get to like turn kids into, you know, test kids and come up with cool experiments and be curious about the game unless they're doing it. And so I think a lot of times it's like that's why the youth kids I think are the hardest, because you don't always know what they're thinking and you don't always open up to them. They don't always open up to you about what they're thinking. But we need to be like totally locked in on being their assistant. And there's this like expectation of like some of the guys in pro ball are only in pro ball because they can connect with players and because guys can buy into what they're doing.
Sure.
On that side of things. So I don't know if that answers the question. I knew I wasn't going to give a great answer there. I would say youth players are harder, but we shouldn't be trying to get them necessarily to do what we say. Like we should be providing them information. My definition of coach. And then if it doesn't make sense to the player, it's your job to build context and your job to make them make the decision, not to tell them what to do, not to get through to them, but to have them like have it be their idea in a sense.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Does anyone want to type in any more questions? That because we don't really have. Oh, I got one. Give me one. I don't know if you can see it too, Ryan, in the question and answer thing.
Let's see.
It was the last one.
I got, what is the website was the last one I saw.
No, it's
JohansenBaseball.com, JoHansen.
Yeah, it's. I think if I'm reading it quick, it's enhancing swing path mechanics and power by letting them figure it out, versus maybe giving verbal. How much verbal cueing are you giving players during their drills? I can kind of twist that question around a little bit. How much verbal cueing are you giving players? Are you kind of just putting them into positions that you want them to do and then saying, okay, be as successful as possible, and then kind of step back and let them feel it out?
I don't know if there's like an exact answer for that. I'm really comfortable with our process. I wasn't always, but we're kind of at a point now where like we know there's a certain amount of failure that kind of happens in the beginning. We're very big on, and it depends too. Is it a player who's gone through a full mobility screen, and I know kind of I can kind of help them compensate and guide them, or is it a player that I'm trying to make look more appealing to my eye? If it's a player that I'm just like, I realize I'm like, hey, I don't really know anything about this player, then I need to challenge their environment and I need to give them external cues. If it's a player I know a lot about their body type and I know how they should move, kind of with my background on that side of things, then I might give them a little bit more internal cues. I might say like, hey, today we're going to work on, slotting your stride foot a little bit more open or a little bit more closed, or striding a little bit further, or striding a little bit shorter. But if I don't know anything about the player, I'm going to stay away from internal cues. And I'm going to internal meaning, put your elbow here, put your foot there, things like that. External being like, hey, try hitting it there, try doing this. I'm going to try it. If I don't know anything about the player, I'm going to really, really go more towards external cues. If I know a lot about the player, I might start with internal cues, and then once they kind of get it, we'll go from there. And then I want to challenge those internal cues with external cues with our machine. And that's kind of where the drills come in, and kind of why we use entertainment mode with the drills, kind of bringing it full circle from the beginning of the talk, and then challenging them with the machine from there. So I guess that's how I would answer that question.
That's a good answer. And there's 2 other questions here. What are your thoughts on attack angle?
We tell our guys to be between 5 and 11. There's definitely some data out there that says like your best chance to hit a homer is maybe a little steeper than that. But like we've seen, we've got all the TrackMan data too. Like guys, just especially with all the stuff that's spinning and everything like that, and stuff that living in the top of the zone, the most successful players between 5 and 11. And that's kind of where that mindset comes into play. It's not just dip and rip, but it's being aggressive, and you'll hit plenty that way. And
I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. Do you know if it's the same, or you believe it's the same for softball?
Softball's a little bit lower. Softball is going to be between like 2 and 9 is what we tell our softball guys or softball girls. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's good. I have a question here that we do get quite often. As a player that's worked with you, and then they go to their team, and then their coach on their team is not necessarily on the same page as what they've been working on in the off season, or what the player also believes in is what they need to be working on at practice and stuff like that. How do you handle that situation?
It really depends on what you want to do. I mean, you need to understand, like, being coachable is really important. But what is coachable? To me, my definition of coachable is gathering information and applying it in a way that makes sense, right? So I think that you have to learn how to be your own coach. And I think there's a couple of things that make players really coachable. You're going to have so many different voices throughout your career, T-ball to pro. And you're going to have time, like even like our pro guys, like they'll be hitting in the cage by themselves, and like a coach will see something and walk up to them and, and just start having conversations. And sometimes that leads to opinions and things like that. And you have to decide, like, okay, is this something that's going to benefit me or is it not? And you have to understand too that like there's different environments. Like each environment has its strength. Being in your facility where you're trying to grow and you're allowed to fail has its strength. Trying to make a team and trying to make a spot, has its strength. Playing in a game has its strength. All these different environments have their strengths. So we tell our guys, that's part of our job as coaches too, on the facility side. I think, we probably do an equal amount of quote unquote, like consulting from our phones after the night's over. Like, hey, I was at my practice and this happened. How should I handle it? And that's a conversation a lot of times we have with the parent and the player. And we try to come up visualize to them, because you don't know what it is. I mean, if it's something we can work between, and us as a facility too, our goal is to make your playing experience better, not only at the level you're at currently, but at where you're trying to go. And so if it's really detrimental to where you're trying to go, like we need to really come up with something, a plan for that. But if it's something where we can just help your playing experience get a little bit better now by maybe changing something that's really the same thing you're doing, but maybe change the style of it, because a lot of coaches teach style. They don't teach mechanics. And so, from a travel perspective anyways, at least what I've found. So maybe we can like compromise and say, okay, let's do his style, but we're going to keep our mechanics on that aspect. Maybe that's how we can kind of get together. So and then there's also times where it's like, hey, dude, if you hit like crushing in practice, just like literally after you crush doing it your way, walk up to your coach and say, hey, thanks for that advice. That really helped. Like it doesn't matter if he actually gets the credit. Like, don't be mad at him for trying to help you. He's trying to help you. And if he goes home and he's like puffs his chest out and he's really excited and he's like, I helped this kid today in practice, and he tells his wife and he feels good about it. Like, cool, you just made that guy feel good. Awesome, good for you. Like,
no, that's
good. To, like in that aspect.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that specifically the person was talking about is how do you, even if or a drill or even a direct a direct contraindication to what you're trying to work on with them, and then the coach is teaching the exact opposite, and doing drills to try to promote that same sort of thing. I know we don't want to go too much longer, but how do you have guys and girls address that?
I mean, you got to do the drill in your team environment, I would imagine. It's one of those things where I would go back, and if you're really worried about it, that's where I'd pull the mirror out, and I'd make sure that my patterns. I mean, we have to understand that motor learning, like we used to think if you do something 3,000 times, like it's just going to magically have like muscle memory. That's not how it works. You're just creating a different movement solution in your brain by doing that drill. It doesn't mean you're going to access it, or you have to access it when you actually play and when you perform. So if you want to be in that team and you want to be a part of the team and your coach is the leader of that team, you kind of have to do that drill. But if you start panicking and thinking like that's what ruined your swing, like it's not going to hurt you as much as you think it's going to. I can't imagine that's going to be. Now, if it's an anxiety thing and he's like just pounding on you and ripping on you, then that's like something you have to worry about on the mental side, to really like believe in yourself and stay and have that belief in what your actual move you want to make. From that aspect, I tell a lot of our pro guys that we train that go back to their affiliates to like basically use the language that your coach uses. Say thanks for showing you that all the time, and anytime you get a hit, always walk up and be like, "Hey, thanks for your help." And then he's gonna assume you're really coachable and you're doing what he's trying to tell you, even though you're not.
That's a great solution. That's a really good solution, because I've never actually heard that before. But if you're exuding positivity and giving them credit for stuff when you're successful, then it can also get them off your back.
100%.
Yeah, no, that's great. John, did you have anything else?
No, I think that was it. I mean, I don't know if anyone has any last minute questions.
Ryan, we've been getting texts and DMs and stuff like that, and I know that the people that have been watching are really appreciative, because they said that this has been a really good webinar, whatever it's called, Zoom meeting webinar.
Right.
That they've learned a lot, and I definitely or John and I really appreciate you coming on board, because it has been very informative, and it's been we've been able to learn about how you approach things, and I think that the more you can hear from people at this level, then the better that it can help out the athletes.
Absolutely. And we don't all agree at this level either. There's no one overarching like pro method. There's no one overarching facility method. Like even as coaches, we have to like gather information and apply what makes sense. And as parents and as players, we're all trying to learn, like we'll have to jump on something. I got questions for you and stuff, and the way you do things and everything like that too. So I love the stuff that you guys put out, and would love to have the opportunity to flip the tables a little bit.
Sure. Definitely. Of course.
Yeah. I think the last thing is, if people want to connect with you on social media, kind of Twitter, Instagram, kind of throw that out there.
My Twitter is RP, P as in Patrick, J1317. So RPJ1317. My Instagram is Johansen_baseball. I have a personal one too. It's Coach_Ryan Johansen. I believe if it's not that, it's Coach Ryan _Johansen. I think it's Coach_Ryan Johansen. But I'm not on that one as much, just because it's, trying to flip back and forth. My email is ryan@johansenbaseball.com. Feel free to shoot me an email. I'll connect with you guys as much as I possibly can. There's also a contact form on our website that'll take you to our support page, where myself or one of our staff members.
And don't forget, I don't know if the people that are still on, if they heard in the beginning, but Ryan is also doing similar style meetings or webinars with some great people. So can you talk to that, Ryan, really quick?
Yeah, so we're doing, we're calling it the GOAT Experience. It's called the GOAT Experience, kind of a twofold reason. So it's an inside joke with our facility. If you want to know, I'll talk about it later. I won't bore you guys now. The other reason is GOAT Baseball, GOATBSBL.com. Is one of our sponsors. If you guys want a discount code for that, it's just WIN, WIN, 25% off. They've got some really cool gear. They've got like some t-shirts on, say like baseball t-shirts on sale right now for like $10 too. So feel free to check that out. But anyways, what it is we have over 12 Major League organizations kind of helping us out with that. Mental coaches, mental skills coaches, hitting coaches, throwing arm care, pitching coaches. We've got Division I coaches on there, basically just donating their time to talk to you guys, similar to this, but kind of in a what you can be doing during this time. If you want to see any of the recordings that have happened up to this point, it's on our website. So johansenbaseball.com, the About tab, go all the way down to the GOAT experience. And every episode we've had up to this point will be on there, as well as any files or any PowerPoints, documents, or things that have been shared on there as well. So that's how you can kind of see that. The one I would really recommend would be Dr. Rob Cipher. He was day number 3. He was Wednesday. He did a phenomenal job. It's almost a 2-hour episode. Just watch the first 15 minutes. Just watch him and what he does and what he talks about. He's unbelievable. He's one of the most world-renowned sports psychologists. Works with the White Sox, works with the Miami Dolphins, used to work with the Marlins. He's got some really good stuff, and it's really simple and easy to understand.
Sure. No, that's great.
Awesome. Yeah.
All right.
I think that's it. Yeah. I think we'll end it here. So, thanks Ryan for coming on. We really appreciate it. I think this was great. I think people got definitely, whoever stuck it out the whole time, definitely got a lot out of it. So I think we had a good amount of people in here too. So it's definitely awesome.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, and best of luck to you guys. Let's connect. Like I said, I want to pick your guys some brains too on what you guys have been doing with what you guys have access to, and how you guys manage your lessons and all that stuff too. So,
sure. Sounds good. Man. Thank you. Stay safe.
Awesome. See you, man.
Yep. See you later.
You can just stop the recording. That's what I just did.